Welcome to the Redeeming Democracy Author Salon. Joining me on one of the last Fridays of the summer. So thanks for you who are not on vacation, or maybe you are on vacation and joining in. And we got a few people jumping in. I have some news right up top that Congressman Jared Huffman is joining us, but he has been delayed. So he is on his way in to home. He has landed in the Bay Area, is on his way home, but he is desperately trying to get to a stable internet and computer. Will be joining us in just a few minutes. But I want to go ahead and jump on with everyone to kind of let you know what was happening and make sure we all got on and people didn't think it got postponed or anything. So I think what we'll do on the beginning here, we may have about 10 minutes before he joins. You're welcome to grab a coffee or something like that at the end of the day. But I think I'll also just take a moment while we're here to turn this into kind of an Ask Me Anything little session. If there's been something you're wondering about, you want me to talk about, we could do that for about 10 minutes, and then he'll just jump in. And as soon as he's here, we will jump in to the conversation. So I'll hold off on my introductions and all of that. I do have some news on my side of things. So one of the best things or the best days in the cycle of a new book is receiving the actual book in hand. You may look behind me here and you see I've got a couple of things up on the shelf. So one's just a placard. The other one is actually just a printout of the galley of the book. But this week, actually received the actual book. So I've got the actual book of mine in my hands now. Backslide, Reclaiming a Faith and a Nation After the Christian Turn Against Democracy. So I got that box of books sitting on the porch and was actually able to open it up and hold it in my hands. So that's always a nice moment. It'll be out just a little more than 2 weeks, just reminding everybody on September the 8th. So thanks to you all. Many of you who are joining early may have already pre-ordered it. Thank you, thank you, thank you. But it'll be there soon. So for those of you who are here early, and if you want to throw a question in, I'm happy to take that on and give you some reflections as we're waiting on. This is where I think I should have some jokes queued up, but feel free to put any comments in the chat. Also, while you're there, we usually have a tradition. If you want to tell us where you're joining from in the chat section there, that's usually helpful for people to see everywhere from where everybody's coming from. I will say I'm very, while I'm waiting on a couple of questions here to come in, I'm super excited about this conversation. Congressman Huffman and I have crossed paths a couple of times in some webinars, but we never actually met in person, and we haven't had a chance to sit down and talk about things. And what I think is so important about his book is that he's, of course, writing from inside the halls of Congress. So from his opening chapter, where he talks about what it was like to be on Capitol Hill and be involved in the final certification of the votes on January 26, 2021. It's a really to another chapter where he talks about the shadow theocracy in our Congress. It's a really unique perspective, and we're also getting him right here at the front end of his book tour. So his book is just out this week. And then he will be joining us. I think one of the reasons why he's skidding into home is he's been on the road already this week on book tour. And then, of course, Congress will convene very soon, but he's been on book tour this week and next week. But we're catching him just on the very end of his travels. So, Lori, thank you. Appreciate the comment there. She's thanking me for writing Backslide, and I'm excited to see it get in the world. I've said to some of you who saw me talk about it before, it is really the most personal book I've written. And, one point of intersection I'll talk with Congressman Huffman about is it's a personal book. And, one of the things I remember here is, I'm in DC. And so seeing the events of January 6th unfold, just blocks away from PRRI's offices, I think really made a big impression on me. I stayed up late that night and actually wrote a piece for Religion News Service that went out the next morning on January 7th. It was just such a deeply affecting thing. And even today, if you have visited DC over the summer or anytime this year, I'm still struck and quite disturbed by the lingering effects of that. And we've got, for example, like when I get on the metro, I go to PRI's offices, which are on 16th Street, just down from the White House. And, just this week, I get off the metro. There are 4 National Guard uh, members just standing around the metro, and they're kind of like that on corners all over DC. Purportedly, right, that there was this kind of fake reason given for suppressing crime in DC, even though violent crime is actually down before Trump even issued this order to have the National Guard deployed all over DC. And now we have racked up a bill of $1.7 billion here in DC just to have the National Guard standing around in groups of 4s doing absolutely nothing all over the city. I've seen them, picking up garbage, just kind of wandering around. They're usually looking pretty miserable, frankly, and just standing around at various places. And it's had no effect on crime. One other thing I'll say about that is something from the news today related to this that really is disturbing. There's a report out by the New York Times today noting that Trump has personally sent his personal lawyer, not the administration's lawyer, but his personal lawyer, to threaten to sue the Center for American Progress. So this is a sort of large progressive think tank here in Washington, D.C., known for all kinds of policy analysis. And they put out a report in July that basically said what I just said, that we spent $1.7 billion on deploying the National Guard in the city of Washington, D.C. And they went and looked at the crime rates. As I said, they were already down before the National Guard was deployed, and there's been absolutely no effect on crime in DC. And they basically put out a report just documenting, that we spent $1.7 billion for nothing here in DC. And now the New York Times is reporting that President Trump is going after them personally, using his personal lawyer to threaten to sue the Center for American Progress for putting out a factually accurate report, but he's claiming it defames him and is going to ask for damages and ask for an apology. And if there are financial damages awarded, they are going to go to him personally. That's what he's claiming in this new lawsuit. Oh, hey, it looks like we may have Congressman Huffman joining us here. I see the thing. And James, thank you while we're waiting on that for flagging Christian privilege. That is absolutely a topic. I have that flag myself. I got a big star on that chapter to cover with Congressman Huffman. Congressman Huffman, how are you?
Robbie, so good to be with you. Sorry for the flight delay that held me up for a few minutes.
Yeah, so you've been on the road, is that right?
Yes, I had a book tour event in Los Angeles last night with Bill Nye, the science guy.
Hey, all right. Well, that sounds apt. We've got a whole chapter on the dumbing down of
Exactly.
America and the attacks on science. So
Yeah.
I bet that was a big hit. I'm jealous, and actually, my son will be jealous. Who's a high school kid, because Bill Nye is like, the
He's a
bomb.
rock star.
Yeah.
Yeah. But so are you, and I'm really delighted to be with you.
All right. Well, yeah, you should sort of breathe, get some water. I understand you just literally just skidded in, right, to do this. But thank you so much. I was doing my best impression of a monologue as you were coming on, but I was talking about it's fitting with the irony that on January 6th, we did not have the National Guard prepared to deal with the violence. And so far, but now President Trump has seen fit to deploy the National Guard for a year now to the tune of $1.7 billion. Supposedly to address the high crime rates, which are non-existent, in DC. Anyway, so I was kind of talking about that, but it's sort of fitting for some of the things we're gonna take up. All right, so I'll kick off. Welcome to being here on the Redeeming Democracy Author Salon. We're really happy and honored to have you with us. You need no real introduction, I think, but I will give your short bio here and we'll jump in. So, for those who don't know, Congressman Jared Huffman is a humanist and the only member of Congress to admit that he does not believe in gods. I love your phrasing. I'm going to ask you about that in a minute. The only member of Congress to admit that he does not believe in gods. He founded the Congressional Free Thought Caucus with Congressman Jamie Raskin, who I want to give a big shout out to, who is my member of Congress. So that's important on my end to say. Lives out right down the road from me to promote sound public policy based on reason, science, and moral values. Lives in San Rafael, California. So welcome. Thanks for being with us.
Robbie, it's great to be with you. When I describe my oddball status as the only humanist in Congress, I usually say I'm the only one dumb enough to publicly say that I don't believe in God. But it is true. I am. I occupy a unique space in the congressional religious demographic.
Yeah. Well, thanks so much for putting out this really important book. I've got it all digitally marked up. So I don't have a physical copy to hold up, but the book is No Profits: The Fight to Save. Yeah, you should hold one up for us here.
Here it
The fight,
is.
the fight to save democracy from Christian nationalism. So let me just start by saying, look, you've got a day job. Um, and writing a book is quite an endeavor. So what led to you just deciding, okay, look, I've got to make the time because it is a commitment. It's a time commitment to put together a book, especially one like this that is well researched, carefully thought out, and covers actually quite a lot of ground. So what made you think, yeah, I really do need to put this down on paper?
Yeah, you know better than anyone how much work it is to put these books together. So I guess first I should say that this is not your typical politician book. I mean, when you hear, "Oh,
Yeah,
politician got a book," everybody's eyes roll and they wonder, okay, what's he running for? This is not the book you write if you're running for president
I was
or
going to
higher.
ask, is this a lead up to your presidential run
Uh,
book? Yeah.
it wouldn't be this book. Look, I wrote this book because for my whole time in Congress, I watched this Christian nationalist
Mhm.
movement grow more militant, stronger, and it like exploded on January 6th. I think you and your listeners understand just how central Christian nationalism was to the insurrection. I thought that would be the wake up call our country needed, but we went back to sleep. And my own colleagues, who the mob was targeting that day, either didn't see the religious element or, chose not to think about it. They went back to sleep too. So I wrote this book to try to do my part in sounding the alarm from inside the Capitol in a way
Mhm.
that hasn't been done before. I wanted to take folks behind the scenes to see what I see every day and to appreciate just how far along this project is. It is much more entrenched than I think most Americans understand.
Yeah.
It is much more explicitly theocratic, and it is getting closer and closer to achieving its objective.
Yeah. No, I so appreciate that. I feel like in the scholarship world, there's been many of us have been trying to kind of wave the flag and sound the alarm, and it has been tough to kind of say, well, why are the government leaders taking this more seriously? And you and Jamie, I think, are definitely exceptions to this. Before we jump in too much, tell us a little bit about just the Congressional Free Thought
Mhm.
Caucus, so people know what that is.
Yeah. So I joined Jamie Raskin in founding this Free Thought Caucus in 2017, 2018. And I thought it would just be him and me as this little cohort dedicated to defending church state separation against what we saw as this continuing encroachment of right wing theocracy and Christian nationalism, frankly. We're up to 37 members today. And it has been, really refreshing and I think hopeful to see more and more members um, at least join the Free Thought Caucus. I would love to see more of my colleagues actually speaking out about this subject. But having 37 members of the Free Thought Caucus makes us bigger than the Republicans' Freedom Caucus, which
All
is
right. Yep.
kind of a cool milestone. The difference being we actually care about freedom.
And I'm gonna ask a basic question, like, what does a caucus do inside of Congress? Like, what does that mean? Like, what does it give you the ability to do when you call something a caucus, and form one?
Yeah, well, there are different types of caucuses. There are working caucuses that are very effective coalitions of shared interests. And then there are just caucuses that exist in name, that I think I'm a member of dozens of caucuses, like the
Okay.
craft brew caucus and the wine caucus. And, you know, virtually nothing happens in those caucuses. They're just affinity groups, really. The Free Thought Caucus is a working caucus, and we write amicus briefs.
Hmm.
We have events and roundtables. We have a flagship annual event that we call the Reason Reception, which is meant to be a little bit of a counterweight to the prayer breakfast that has become such a Christian nationalist spectacle in recent years.
Yeah. Well, that's great. Well, let me jump in because there's so much to cover here. I want to make sure we get to some of the book, but you know, I was struck because, I wasn't as close to ground zero on January 6th as you were, but our offices are on 16th Street. You know, I live in DC or, and I live just outside DC, but work in DC, commute in, for work. So those scenes are places I walk all the time, when I was seeing those on TV. But take us a little bit of, the first chapter you kind of open up with, The Cross and the Coup was a great chapter title. Yeah, but like, what did you see and how did it feel being on Capitol Hill, while all that was going down? Because you take us inside again in the book. I think it's one of the powerful things. You take us inside that world and what it looked like and felt like being there, and then what you've made out of it as you've been reflected on it.
Yeah, I think it's the only place to start. The story that I wanted to tell, to sort of show you what I saw in real time that day, and I did see this profusion of religious extremism. It was hard not to notice. I'm a little more attuned to it because I have a complicated history with religion, as I write about in the book. I'm certainly not hostile to religion at all, but I'm, as a non-believer and someone who was once a devout Christian, I'm somewhat as a layperson, I guess I'm more fluent than most, and I noticed a lot of this stuff. But in real time, to tell you the truth, I really thought this coup was almost entirely Donald Trump and just people that were so very loyal to him doing his bidding to keep him in power. It was only afterwards that I had time to process it a little more, to learn a little bit about what was behind all of those religious symbols and all of those fanatics that were on site, to hear from people like Dr. Matthew Taylor, who really followed the theology and the evidence and unearthed the full story of that. And I came to believe that, yeah, Trump was using these Christian nationalists for sure. They were very helpful to him, but they were using him too.
Mm.
And this is where I really came to appreciate the full agenda, the full theocratic agenda at work here. And it's why I feel like the select committee and, Liz Cheney primarily did the country such a disservice by burying all this and keeping it out of the final 845-page report on the insurrection.
I'm going to come back to that because I want to talk about that some more. I think that's really important. So I vividly remember because I was home watching the images live on TV and just in disbelief, and I couldn't sleep that night,
Yeah,
because it was so disturbing to me. And as a religion scholar, of course, the things that did stand out to me were the crosses, Trump is my, president, Jesus is my savior, crosses being used as weapons, against law enforcement officers, like those kinds of things.
yeah.
And I literally couldn't sleep. And I stayed up and I actually wrote a piece that I titled "Taking the White Christian Nationalists at the Capitol riot seriously," and they got published in Religion News Service on January 7th.
Wow.
Because I just thought like, oh, wait, this is something, So I'm in my late 50s, and I was just like, I've never seen anything like this, right? As a scholar paying attention, there are all kinds of crazy things I have seen,
Yeah,
but nothing like this have I seen with religion being so directly linked to violence, so directly linked to overthrowing a democratic process, right? That's a bright line we haven't really crossed in my
yeah,
lifetime, and thought it was so. So I'm so happy, like you start there and really take us inside. I think that thing, and you write, I think so clearly. I think this is really important. That you write, that the Christian nationalism was the engine of January 6th, right? And that we still haven't reckoned
Yeah.
with that. And I think that's such a powerful insight. I do want to go to the Christian privilege
Yeah. Yeah.
chapter. And so if there's one place I've got more highlights, kind of electronic highlights, and if I had a physical book, it'd be dog eared or sticky noted. It would be that chapter. So tell me, so you write about, because I remember this too. When I saw the final report, I was like, wait, yeah,
Something's missing here.
because I'm
Uh,
friends with Peter Manso,
oh,
and
yeah.
Matthew Taylor, and we had been exchanging emails, and they had seen my piece in the Religion News Service, and like okay, wait, what happened here? And even on the video that the House Select Committee showed, there was an image of a person with a flag and a cross,
Yeah.
right, in the video, right, itself, in the evidentiary, video. So I was like, "Okay, wait, what's going on?" So now I know, what's
Yep.
going on. Now, I did until I read your book, I did not know. Is this unreported until this book? Because I hadn't seen it, frankly.
So there had been speculation,
Yeah,
that this is what happened, but no one had been able to confirm it, and so I talked to members of the select committee, I talked to staff, and I got the full story of what went down behind the scenes, and I share it in this chapter because I think it is such a glaring example of this thing that I call Christian privilege.
yeah,
I argue that I believe this blind spot we have for religious violence and extremism when it is Christian is making us less safe. It's one of our biggest challenges to confronting this movement.
yeah. Alright, I got some data for you, and so I should also say thank you for using PRI data in your book. I'm glad it was
The best
useful and
stuff. Yeah.
useful and helpful to you. But I dug up because I read that chapter, I was like, "Oh, man, this reminds me of a survey experiment we did where we were trying to figure out exactly this double standard that Americans have, where they're going to give Christianity a pass and not give any other religion a pass, particularly when it comes to violence. So we actually asked a question. We split the sample in half, and we asked one half of the sample, um, when someone commits an act of violence in the name of Christianity, do you believe that they are really Christian or not? You will not be surprised to hear that only 19% of Americans say, "Yeah, we think they're really Christian." They're willing to kind of give them a pass, right? No, they're not a real Christian if they did this bad thing.
Yeah.
So we asked the other half of the sample, if someone is Muslim and commits an act of violence in the name of Islam, do you believe they are really Muslim? Twice as many Americans said yes, to
Wow.
that question, right? So it's like 37% of Americans said, "Oh, yeah, they're really Muslim,"
There
right?
you go.
But only 19% were willing to say they're really Christian. And I thought it kinda gets right to the heart of what you mean. So just say a little bit more about Christian privilege and unpack that concept for folks,
Yeah.
and then we'll talk about how it impacted the report a little more.
Yeah, so with all of this stuff, when I talk about the theology of Christian nationalism, when I go into this Christian privilege issue, I try to use what studies have shown and what sociologists and experts like you have told us with their surveys and their data. Christian privilege, the experts describe as kind of a cultural reflex, basically to presume that things Christian are good, that even scrutinizing or criticizing them is something to be opposed and resisted. It is, as I say, kind of a Bible-sized blind spot for our country.
Mm,
What Liz Cheney did and the fact that we didn't get to know the full story of January 6th because of that is an example, but it's not the only one. I cite a bunch of other examples where we have been made less safe because we just tend to give Christian violence and Christian extremism a pass, and that
yeah,
essentially is Christian privilege.
yeah. So let me get the details of this right. So you write in the book that what happened is, of course, there was tons of evidence that the select committee was dealing with, divided into teams, right? And people took different topics.
Yep.
And there was a purple team assigned to deal with kind of the religious extremism, or at least that part of it came under their purview. And there was actually a draft report produced that did include the Christian nationalist piece of this and all the Christian symbols and the way that contributed to the violence, that got presented and written up and documented, and then got suppressed.
Got
And
buried.
and the order came down from Liz Cheney. Is that
Right.
correct?
Liz and only Liz. Everyone else was fine. Um, Adam Kinzinger, an evangelical, the other Republican on the select committee, knew that it would be sensitive to include this, but he thought there was a way to do it while
Yeah.
explaining that, we're not attacking Christianity. Um, Jamie Raskin, like you, publicly expressed disappointment that it didn't make the final cut. So he wanted it in. Talked to Pete Aguilar. I talked to the chairman, Benny Thompson. They pushed back on Liz, and Liz would not have it. She really put her foot down.
All right. So now I'm going to ask the question that the researcher is going to ask. Can scholars access
Yeah.
that draft report? Does it exist anywhere that is accessible? I mean, for historical reasons, that would be really important to somehow get on the record, I think.
Wouldn't it? Well, you can imagine I tried very hard to get my hands on that purple team draft report,
Yeah.
and I couldn't find it. All the people I talked to did not keep draft work product. The staff, kind of said, "Well, we'll keep looking, but we can't find it." I don't know if this was deliberately um, erased because Republicans were taken over, and there was a desire not to leave, a lot of interim or draft work product that could be misinterpreted or whatever. But I couldn't get anyone to
Mm.
share that with me. If someone could come up with that, I'd be thrilled. I did my very best. I couldn't find it.
Yeah. Well, it has been, as you point out, I mean, it was documented elsewhere. And one place I'm really glad you cited is this project called the Uncivil Religion project that the University of Alabama and the Smithsonian actually partnered on that. And there's a website you can still go on, and they collected video footage and still shots and audio and video. All right, that you can still access, and it's now part of a publicly accessible permanent archive. So it's not, but it would be good if that would turn up somewhere and we could see,
But
you know,
can you believe Trump hasn't taken that down?
yeah,
I'm
right,
shocked. I mean,
yeah,
he's censoring everything else at the
I know,
Smithsonian National Park Service, so I would say go to Uncivil Religion, see that exhibit now while you
yeah.
still can, download it if you can.
Well, I think they smartly housed it at the University of Alabama instead of on the Smithsonian's
Yeah,
website, so it's at least not directly under the control of the federal, government right now. So, and there's always the Wayback Machine, or if it's been on
I
on
hope
the
so.
web. But I think you're right. I mean, it's worth going to and taking a look at. Very, very important, kind of archival, work, there. So it reminds me of, so I was interviewing, a woman in a church in Macon, Georgia, for my last book, and it was a group of a kind of white church and a black church that had come together to really talk about their fraught past. And in this case, the two churches used to be the same church before the Civil War, and were like after the Civil War split by race. The black members went this way, the white members went this way, and they were reckoning with that really fraught history. And the woman who was an elderly white woman, and she, like, literally said in the interview, like, the one of the things that I she said, "The one of the things I had the hardest time getting over is I grew up thinking of, good, God-fearing church members as good people who do good things. And I had to kinda get over that defensive, conception, right? Not that that's not ever true, certainly it is, but it's not the whole truth. And in fact, if you insist on that being the whole truth, you're probably hiding something, right? And I think that's what she was saying. Like, as a Christian, right? She wasn't anti-Christian. She was like, as a Christian, I've had to kind of come to terms with a Christianity that's maybe not so innocent, and a Christianity that's been complicit in all kinds of things. And that's not anti-Christian either. It's not Christian bashing. In fact, in her reckoning, I think that's the spirit that you're writing. It's actually in service of a better version of Christianity, to be honest
That's
about
just
these
being
things.
honest. I mean,
Yeah.
anything else would be bearing false witness, would it not?
No, yeah, no, that's right. So, one of the places I thought this came into play, and I think why it's so dangerous, and another, I could think about January 6th. The other time I could think in recent memory that I wrote something just, um, so angry, on my side, was Pete Hegseth's Senate hearing, because there was just no attempt to take seriously his extremist
Yeah.
Christian nationalist views. Like they gave him a pass all the way through that hearing. And the only person who asked him a religion question was a Republican, and it was a total softball question that just got him to talk about his faith or whatever. But it
Yeah.
didn't. But this is a man with Christian nationalist tattoos on his body,
Yeah.
right? And the words "Deus vult," right? God wills it with a sword, and he's being vetted to be the head of the most powerful military in the world, and we didn't think it was important to ask him about his Christian nationalist views, right?
And he's written that he thinks we're in this existential
Yeah,
modern day crusade where we have to vanquish Islamic civilization and ideology to save Western civilization. Yeah, that seems like that should have come up.
maybe. Yeah, yeah. But I thought it was also another perfect example of how we're really making ourselves putting ourselves at risk by being unwilling to interrogate
Yeah,
these things in the way that and you give the double standard. Like if he had been Muslim and made any of these claims, had tattoos on his body about Allah and the Crusades from a Muslim point of view, I mean, he wouldn't even gotten to that point.
absolutely.
Um,
Yeah, I think there's 2 sides to this Christian privilege challenge. I think there is this sort of deference, this sort of "we can't touch it" kind of thing that maybe, maybe just speaks to um, our commitment to religious freedom, to each their
yeah,
own, don't question, don't criticize. But then there is the fear of backlash, because part of this Christian nationalist movement, part of right wing Christianity, is like this hyper reactive immune system that instantly attacks anyone that questions or threatens it. And I could imagine any senator that raised these questions with Pete Hegseth would have just been pilloried
I'm
on
sure.
right wing news. I mean, Dianne Feinstein was pilloried when she asked some tough questions of Amy Coney Barrett, and then, you know, used the unfortunate words of, the dogma, I think, is strong in you, or something like that.
Yeah,
Remember that?
yeah, yeah. Yeah, I do think it feels like a kind of immature, unreflective reaction though, right? That there's a middle ground here, right? You don't have to kind of, uh, cast aspersions, about someone's faith, but if their faith has clear implications for the job that they're being, uh, vetted for, right? In this case, again, if we're talking about Hegseth, his views on Christianity and violence seem pretty relevant for the job he was about to, head into. So
Yeah.
anyway, but I really appreciated that piece. I found like super powerful. Like I said, I spent a lot of time, with that chapter for sure. Another place in the book that I'd love you to talk about is where you take us inside, and I think this is where it's not that visible to those of us who aren't walking the halls of Congress. The shadow, you call it the shadow theocracy, and just the ways that you've seen these powerful networks being formed at the highest levels, right, of our government, and they remain fairly invisible to the outside. So, help us
Yeah.
kind of understand what you've seen on that front.
Yeah, I call it the ministry industrial complex, with apologies to C. Wright Mills, but, it is vast, it is entrenched at the highest levels, and you're right, you don't see it if you just walk around or take the tour of the US Capitol, but I see it every day. These pastors that have ministries that exist entirely just to indoctrinate members of Congress and congressional staff in, extreme right-wing Christianity, and then they go back and they fundraise based on their proximity to power. So there's a bunch of ministries just like that. Some of them are really sophisticated, and some of them just have an enormous amount of power and influence. One of the ones that I profile is Capital Ministries, run by a guy you surely know, Ralph Drollinger, um, who has kind of personally stepped back, but he's got some other surrogates that are running these Bible studies, several a week in both the House and the Senate and the White House, with cabinet officials co hosting the Bible study. Thune and Mike Johnson co hosting the congressional Bible studies, dozens of members of Congress every single week, receiving instruction essentially from this very controversial and very bigoted right wing pastor. And he's doing the same thing in the White House. He brags, Ralph Drollinger brags, that His subjects in these Bible studies are so teachable. And as an example, he talked about how he gave a Bible study on what God wants people in power to do on immigration based on his interpretations of scripture. And later that day, he watched the attorney general at the time, which was Jeff Sessions, you may recall, cite the same biblical verses
Mm.
that he had just taught in his Bible study for why we should separate families at the border and have this maximalist uh, policy against immigration. So that's one aspect of it. There's also all sorts of Christian nationalist power players that have just been elevated by folks like Mike Johnson and Russell Vogt. And I talk in this chapter a little bit about how that has been unfolding.
Mm. Yeah, how different does this feel? Like, from previous moments, you write about, this is not our father's Christian right movement that we're dealing with here, and many times, you feel like your colleagues are acting as if we're back in the 1980s. But maybe you could say a little bit more about how this feels different and why you feel like this is a very different animal, than, say, the old Christian right.
Yeah, so I do have a chapter where I talk about kind of how we got from the what was called the new religious right of the 1980s, the moral majority folks, to today, where you have this far more militant right wing Christianity that is very explicitly theocratic. They're done with democracy. They are trying to destroy church state separation. They don't even, you know, bridge any subtlety about church state separation. They're just done with it. So, the moral majority, I really didn't care for the moral majority. I was in college in the 1980s and I studied it. I didn't like anything about Jerry Falwell and those characters, but they were working within the system of democracy. They were trying to wage a culture war by, various types of persuasion and using the democratic process. When that movement fell apart in the early 1990s with the collapse of the Cold War, there was definitely a regrouping of right wing Christianity and a hardening of it, a new militancy. We went through the militia movement. You had the rise of the New Apostolic Reformation and this very theocratic, very militant faction that really caught fire and kind of redefined evangelical Christianity for millions of people. And all of that fed into where we are today, which is a movement that is really almost makes me feel nostalgic for Jerry Falwell and the moral majority.
Right. Yeah, with at least some pretense of a democratic framework, that was still intact. So let me just tell her we're gonna turn to questions now. So we got a couple in the chat. If you want to put some more there, please do. But I'll start with we have a question from Anne and from James. I'll give you Anne's question first. Says Jared, can you say more about the motives for squashing the part of the January 6th report that looked more closely at religious violence?
What we know is that Liz felt it would distract from the accountability of Donald Trump. All right. And we all knew that Donald Trump's accountability was an important part of the story that day. She said it would be seized on by Fox News and right wing media and used to discredit the rest of the report. And then publicly, her spokesperson said she didn't want to sign on to any narrative that disparaged good Christians as extremists or terrorists or something like that. So those are kind of what we know she said. I will never know why she was so insistent that all this stuff had to come out, but I personally think it may have had something to do with her wanting to run for president because you do need to keep this story entirely about Donald Trump if you intend to
Mm,
run against the Trump MAGA movement and try to succeed. And you don't pick a fight with right wing Christians if you're going to try to get the
mm.
Republican nomination for president.
So you think it may have been political calculation at the end?
That's just my
Yeah.
personal feeling. I can't say that for sure.
Yeah. Yeah. All right. Well, James asks, so this is a great question. Why do many Democrats participate in the congressional prayer breakfast and probably some of these Bible study groups, another manifestation of Christian privilege? or fear of being accused of being anti-Christian? What do you think's going on there?
Yeah, I think some do it in a rather naive hope that, they can find some common ground through their shared faith with these extremists and, maybe build a little bit of bipartisan goodwill. My colleague Jonathan Jackson, for example, who is hardly a Christian nationalist, participated and was a co-host of the Congressional Prayer Breakfast this past year, and the National Prayer Breakfast rather, a little bit of a different event. Um, I talked to him about it afterwards, and I'm not sure he thinks in hindsight that that was a great idea.
Mm,
I don't think he had any idea just what a right-wing spectacle that event was gonna be. But, I think members still hope that they can find some bipartisanship through events like this. But I believe that ship has sailed. I believe
mhm,
events like the National Prayer Breakfast have been so co-opted by right-wing extremism and so corrupted that Democrats are simply lending a bipartisanship imprimatur to an event that doesn't deserve that.
mm. Yeah. So we have one more. Again, James here. I'm very hopeful that in 2027, a new Senator Tallarico from Texas will not be reluctant to challenge the Christian nationalist narrative and do it with confidence as the Christian he is. I'll just tag on a little caveat to that. Do you feel like the tide's turning where people are less reluctant to call to call Christian nationalism out
Mhm.
now as we're moving kind of into seeing we're now what 5 years out from
Yep.
January 6th and it's done nothing but ramp up since then.
Well, I agree that Tallarico is a great messenger on this. And the fact that somebody with that high profile political station is doing it, is speaking out very directly against Christian nationalism is unique, and I'm thrilled by that. People like you, Robbie, have been calling this out from a faith perspective for a while now. So I think we are seeing more and more Christians calling out Christian nationalism. The point I make in the book, though, is I am definitely rooting for you guys to win that debate over who's got the gospel right. I think I'm for you. Uh, I don't know that there are enough good Christians to win this fight right now. This project is pretty far along.
Yeah.
And when I think about what's at stake and the threat that I see, there's 35% plus, the exact data, 35% plus of the country is either non-Christian or non-religious. And you can't just keep that group on the sidelines while we wait for the good Christians to
Mm.
win the theological debate. This is bigger than that. And by the way, it's about more than the gospel. It is about our democracy. It's about our fundamental rights. It's about the livability of this planet. So, lots of reasons why uh, we got to get everybody working in coalition and focused on Christian nationalism in a big way.
Yeah. Well, that's a good segue. I wanted to ask you about what you call at the end of the book team compassion versus was it team
Vengeance.
vengeance. Yes, yes, team compassion. I can't read my own handwriting. So team compassion versus team vengeance. So you say you're rooting, for those of us working inside the Christian tradition to try to call it back to its better angels. But say a little bit more about that vision and what you do think. At the end of the day, right? You say I wouldn't write this book if I didn't think there was hope
Yeah.
to turn this around. So what does that look like?
So I open that chapter, which is Defenders of Democracy, with the inaugural prayer service at the National Cathedral when Trump was sworn in for his second term just last January 2025, and the homily that was given by Bishop Marianne Edgar Buddy. And it was kind of unusual because normally at an inaugural prayer service, the incoming president gets to choose the
Yeah,
minister that delivers that sermon. Marianne Edgar Buddy, as the Archbishop of DC, I think is her title, insisted that she was going to do it herself. She had something she wanted to say to Donald Trump. And he was right there in the front row, and she took him to the moral woodshed. Uh, remind, Reminded him of the Beatitudes and all of the radical compassion and inclusion and mercy and all of these things that
Yeah,
many of us.
extremists
Yeah,
use, like, mercy and
radical,
right.
radical Marxist stuff.
Yeah.
Uh, and it just caused this huge fight. Right-wing Christians attacked her. They said that the cathedral had been taken over by lesbians. I mean, it got really nasty. I had, I think more than a dozen House Republicans, sign on to a resolution calling for her to be deported.
Oh, yeah, I remember this, yeah.
And criticizing her for not teaching the true gospel, right? I mean, I guess that Sermon on the Mount is not the true gospel anymore. So to me, that is a pretty darn good framing of this debate you folks are having within Christianity, team compassion versus team vengeance. And it's great that that sparked such a debate, and uh, a lot of moderate and progressive Christians were so thrilled with the bishop for standing up to Trump, and the right wingers were furious because they view Trump as a prophetic figure, and that anyone who takes him on like that is almost engaging in sacrilege,
Yeah.
right? But the rest of us were just watching from the sidelines, and nobody was talking about the fact that our democracy is under siege right now by what Trump is doing and by these right wing Christians. So that's kind of where I try to take this. I try to take this back to the imperative of not just letting this be a debate about the gospel as much as I'm rooting for you. We really have to bring it back to democracy.
Yeah, no, I so appreciate that. So you're on the road here. I just put, by the way, kind of last call for questions. We're kind of turning toward the end of the time together here, but uh, what's been the reception? So you've been out on the road. You had a couple events maybe this week,
Yeah.
and I mean, how's it been? Like, uh, how are people receiving it?
It's going great. We had a wonderful event in LA last night. Bill Nye, the science guy,
Yeah.
was my partner in conversation. We talked a lot about another element of this Christian nationalist threat because mostly we talk about it as a threat to democracy, as a threat to religious freedom, our form of government, our individual rights. All of that is true. But it's actually an even bigger threat than that because they are attacking the institutions of learning and knowledge and science and research that we depend on today far more than in our founders' time, when it was really primarily a fight about individual liberty. Today, we look to the National Institutes of Health and
Mm,
climate scientists and others to keep us alive, to help us solve these crises of our own making, whether it's pandemics or the climate crisis. So I talk a lot in a chapter I call "The Dumbing of America" about that part of the Christian nationalist threat and that reason for pushing back. Bill Nye obviously is pretty passionate about that.
mm, yeah. Well, like I said, I'm envious of you being on the stage with Bill Nye. That would have been great fun. So look, trying to think as we're wrapping up here, what do you want to leave people with? So this is, my Substack's called Redeeming Democracy, and
Yeah.
so people that think a lot about this intersection of religion, democracy. Uh, a new book's called Backslide, right, which is both religious and democratic backsliding
Yep.
that we're struggling with today. But I do think a lot of people are looking for some hope,
Yeah.
and two things: looking for some hope and looking for what to do in the
Yeah.
coming months. So maybe you could kind of leave us with some hope and like what do you think people should do?
First of all, read these books. Backslide is on my reading list. As soon as I get done with this book tour, I'm diving in, and I can't wait to
Thank you.
do that. But Robbie, I am a lot better at the what we should do part of your question
Yeah.
than I am about, oh, just serve us up some hope, because I am a stoic. And I talk in the book about the fact that I just can't sugarcoat how serious and grave
Yeah.
this is. So I don't want people to think that, this will all just be okay. This is not a moment for that, in my opinion. The example I give is a figure from the Italian resistance during Mussolini's fascism, Antonio Gramsci. So
Mhm.
Mussolini imprisoned him and tried to break his will. And the guy just kept writing these letters to members of the Italian resistance and kept inspiring them and urging them to fight. And he was asked, "How do you maintain hope?" And he was fairly dismissive of the question. He said, "This is not a moment to think about hope or despair, optimism or pessimism." The way he put it is, we need pessimism of the intellect and
Mhm.
optimism of the will. And I think that is a fantastic way of thinking about just the dire threat we really are facing. This is not a drill. And that's one of the main things in my book. I want to show people inside the citadel of government that this is not a drill. This is really happening. But we're not going to let them win, and we can still win. And so, if you still want something called hope, I guess for me it comes down to the fact that more Christians are finding their voice. This should help us begin to confront this Christian privilege challenge, where we stop just looking away from the threat of
Mhm.
Christian nationalism. Most Americans overwhelmingly don't want to live in a creepy right wing theocracy. They very much support church state separation. Your polling is fantastic on church state
Mhm.
separation, even among Republicans and
Yeah.
Christians. So we've got a lot to work with here if we can get this right. If we can first understand what we're up against and what they're doing and how to confront it, and then work together in a broad, focused coalition. We can do this.
Well, thank you. I think it's a great place to wrap it up, and we'll let you get some rest. I know you've been on the road, and launch week is always crazy for new books. But thank you so much for the book. Thank you so much for the work you're doing in Congress on all of our behalves for the Congressional Free Thought Caucus, and for putting this book into the world. So thanks so much.
Thank you, Robbie. Great to be with you.
All right, thank you.